Africa's biggest economy, the cost of plowing huge financial and human resources into further education and training seems to be prohibitive and doesn't address the problem of unemployment among South Africa's youth population. Joining us now on the subject is Michael Cosser, who's an acting head of the Post-School Education and Training Research Program at the Human Sciences Research Council, who joins myself and Vikas Murray. Michael, thank you very much for coming through. South Africa, investors often lament, has a serious skills deficit. Wages are too high, skills too low. And when you look at that differential compared to investing in East Asian economies, even some South American economies, it's better to go there than come here.
Yes, that is probably the case. We certainly do have huge challenges in terms of skills development in this country. And I think the tendency has been to say we need to go the high skills route while ignoring the intermediate and low skills route. So one of the arguments we would make at the Human Sciences Research Council is that we need to invest resources into skills development at all three levels.
Now, just talk to us about the main challenges that exist within higher education and just generally within the education system. We know we don't have the greatest system, but what are the real areas of concern?
Well, one of the issues is that higher education is one of the only options for post-school learning for learners coming out of school. We have learners dropping out, of course, at every level of high school, grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12. And so we have approximately 2.8 or 3 million young people who are not in employment, education or training. So, you know, there's a huge social problem there apart from anything else. And these people can't access jobs, which is why we have such a large unemployment rate. At the same time, there are just not sufficient learning opportunities at the intermediate level. So one of the arguments I'm making is that we need to expand learning opportunities at that level so that we bring back agricultural colleges, nursing colleges, education colleges, to try and boost the skills development at that level so that people can access jobs from there, not just from higher education.
Right, let's chip away at it in small blocks here. Those who criticize the system in general say there's a huge disjunct, as it were, between higher education and basic education. The aptitude that's needed when you get to university level isn't there, and something is not right about the way in which learners are being prepared at a secondary school, even primary school level, for them to be able to make it at university level, hence the dropout rates or the high attrition rate.
That certainly is the case, and it is very much a cumulative model, so that if children coming into school haven't had an early childhood development, they're immediately at a disadvantage. They then try and acquire literacy and numeracy skills in primary school, the early phases. If they don't get it there, they carry that deficit into higher education, or rather into secondary education, and therefore we have a snowballing effect, which leads to a situation in which many people coming into higher education haven't got the capacity to actually cope with those learning programs.
Right. So then what's the intermediate solution? If somebody is not equipped to go to university but was smart enough to get through high school, what's the alternative?
Well, as I said before, there need to be more learning opportunities in the intermediate band. So a lot of learners who now are opting for higher education, and it's a kind of high education or nothing scenario, need to be given opportunities to go into further learning. And so more intensive technical education, agricultural colleges, nursing colleges, teacher colleges is certainly, I think, the way to go.
But you know, the government had established these further education and training centres. Why are they not working well, if indeed they're not working well?
That's a very complex question, and we don't really have time to talk about that in any depth. But some of the reasons are that the staff in FET colleges are not always equipped to teach in the way that is needed by the labour market. Some of them don't have industry experience, and so there's a mismatch there. The learners coming in are often learners who are going for a sort of second chance at matric, and so they're not in colleges to acquire technical skills, but it's really, trying to play catch up.
Right.
And so you've got a combination of factors that leads to poor outcomes.
Okay, Vickers, your input on this one. We know that this is a huge stumbling block when it comes to the attractiveness of South Africa as an investment destination. The skills deficit, the poor level of skills. And as government pursues an industrial action policy program, for instance, they're looking at labor-intensive sectors because you've got to deal with this 25% unemployment rate.
Indeed. Now, there are two ways to do it. You must either upskill the current workers, or you must actually accept that you need to be competitive in low-skilled jobs and low-skilled industries. So you need to either change your labor relations and your labor legislation to accommodate lower-end, low-skilled workers, or you need to upskill people, and you probably need to do a combination of both. Now, what you would have heard from the government up to very recently is we want to create good jobs. The current government has come in and said we want to create jobs. So there's definitely a slightly different slant to it, and the whole currency debate is also pulled into that. But trying to upskill people is a really important part of it. And I'd like to actually ask Michael about two institutions. The one is the CETAs. Where does the CETA fit into that? And then I also was very interested in the idea of community colleges that you've brought to the fore.
Okay, well, let's look at CETAs first. Sector Education and Training Authorities are meant to quality assure the training that takes place in this country, and in fact they've taken a bigger role as they've grown in actually training learners. They are looking for partnership opportunities with FET colleges to provide the learning that they can then quality assure, to ensure that they have appropriately skilled persons to go out into the workforce. And the fact that they've now been included in the Department of Higher Education and Training, I think is a big step forward, because for once now we actually have a situation where education and labour are brought together in a way that was originally envisaged but hasn't happened over the last 10 years. So that's as far as CETAs are concerned. Community colleges is an interesting thing. There have been calls over the last 15 years, but not very strong calls, for community colleges to be introduced into this country. But it's really a way of giving learners a second chance. So those learners who are currently going into FET colleges, I'm arguing, shouldn't be going in there if they're not going to follow a technical route. They should actually be going into community colleges, get a second chance, and from there they can go into other learning opportunities, including higher education.
This question, Vickers, because you raised it, your opinion, and then maybe you can just correct us if we're wrong. With the sector education and training colleges or systems, for instance, you've seen it work in a sector like tourism, where along the tourism value chain, people are being skilled, the sector's growing, more employment is coming through. But in other areas, there is a sense that they don't work very well. Why would you think there'd be a sectorial specification, as it were, for success or for failure? What is that reflective of in the economy?
I think that there's the whole idea of the CETAs, that is actually a very good idea, is to say that if you train someone for something specific and they're not employed in that area for, let's say, a year or two, they lose those skills again. So the whole idea of the CETAs is you train someone and they immediately get employed in that sector. So it's actually a very good idea in its basic form. The problem is that all of these different CETAs were created out of nothing about 10 years ago. So what's happened is that some of them were well staffed. In some instances, the industry worked well with the CETA, and those are successful. And in other cases, it didn't really get off the ground. The fact that some of them are working says the basic idea is a good idea, but we need to actually look at the implementation along the line.
Just in terms of these CETAs, what do you think needs to be done to enhance vocational training? Because that's essentially it, preparing the South African youth for the labour market.
Well, I mean, one option is to actually introduce some form of vocational training earlier on, even than in FET colleges. So look again at the notion of technical schools, for instance. I think the notion of an academic matric, which is what we push constantly, is not the way to go in this country. We need to actually broaden it to introduce technical and vocational skills earlier.
Okay, and a final question to you. I mean, we've had so many initiatives, one would argue, to try to address the skills problem. We've had GIPSA under the previous administration, probably still exists, and it was centered within the presidency. Now we've split the Ministry of Education into basic education and into higher education. We're looking and reviewing the merits and the demerits of outcomes-based education, and probably there's going to be a curriculum change. So you get a sense that the authorities know something's not right, and they're constantly trying to fix what's not right, but they're not doing it well enough. What's wrong policy-wise?
Well, I mean, some would say, you know, we're just in an age of experimentation because, you know, things are not working, so let's experiment with some other kind of system. I think that the problems are deeper rooted than that. I mean, clearly, if you look at what we've inherited from the apartheid system, it's going to take a generation or two to actually fix them. And there are, therefore, no quick fixes. And, you know, one of the main issues is the quality of teaching at schools, even in universities, and certainly in FET colleges. That is one issue that seriously needs to be fixed if we're going to make any progress. And you can have any system in the world, but until you start fixing teaching, we're going to continue with the same problems.
Okay, the teachers go back to the classroom and teach. For the learner who needs a job, what is their option? What are the solutions?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Simply that. There's one problem that's been identified, but the main problem, the children who cannot find jobs because they're not equipped, those are the people fundamentally who need to be sorted out. What is the option for them right now?
There isn't, unfortunately, a simple option because, you know, we've got to look at the absorptive capacity of the labor market. Are there jobs for learners to go into? So, you know, the difficulty is on both the demand side and the supply side. But I think we need to start at primary school level. We need to get the basics right, literacy, numeracy, and to build in a constructivist way upon those skills so that we at least give our learners some chance of making it themselves and of being able to choose their own destiny, which at the moment they don't have.